This is the world according to Jen, Carolyn.
All right, everybody. So today we're going to be discussing codependency.
Everyone's favorite topic.
Yeah, definitely.
I never hear anything about this.
No. And so we're going to break down what it means to be codependent, as well as explore the most common contributing factors to developing codependent tendencies. So I've got a lot of issues related to trauma, but codependency isn't one of them. So I can't personally relate, except for watching my mom be a classic codependent. It was, I don't feel like my mom ever really dated. Everybody immediately became a long-term girlfriend.
Interesting.
It was like a lesbian stereotype.
Huh.
That joke, what does a lesbian bring to a second date? A U-Haul? Yeah, I feel like I can say that because I was raised by a lesbian. But it was so true. It was like, she couldn't be alone. She wanted so badly to be loved, but didn't know how to love or let somebody love her because she was also a borderline. So I grew up witnessing this. Yeah. But fortunately, thanks to therapy, I realized these weren't behaviors that I wanted to emulate. So I don't have personal experience with codependency. Yeah. But Carolyn,
I do. I should be a motherfucking poster child. I was going to say, though, your mom had pretty complex trauma.
Yes.
And codependency is a horrific byproduct of complex trauma.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that.
And I think you've had a lot of codependent friends. Me as well.
Yeah, I think so. I've had a lot of friends with substance use disorder who tend to have codependent tendencies and definitely tend to have trauma. Yeah. So, but tell us about your codependency.
Why not? I was saying before we recorded, this was really hard for me to even write. So I want to preface with, in this episode, we're going to be talking about, or I'm going to be talking about myself, Jen's going to be talking about the concepts of this. You're going to think we're talking about you. And you're probably...
And we might be.
And you're going to feel like shit. Yeah. Because it is a shame-based behavior. It is a shame-based trauma. It comes from family systems. It comes from these places. So I just want to say, this is a safe space. You are loved. I hope this helps wherever you are within that. Yeah. But as I mentioned before, I hear codependency everywhere. Yeah. Anyone who comes into my practice has a very interesting relationship with calling themselves anxious or depressed. But when you use the term codependency, it is a very loaded word. And in the same way that I would never, someone would come in and I'd be like, hey, you're a narcissist. Yeah. It can feel very even shaming calling someone codependent. Yeah. But, this term goes through, every few years we get hit with a term, right? I like to say that codependency is kind of like the kale or the bacon. Yeah. Some fad that gets overused and overlooked, and codependency is huge with that. Yeah. So I see the most of my clients, and typically when they enter therapy, it's because they're in a bad relationship, bad dating.
That's always when I ran back to therapy.
100% same. And believe me, your therapist appreciates that. Yeah. And we want to help you at that moment. That's good. But it's the most important thing to understand in the clinical work, and you can't understand it without understanding trauma. Yeah. So codependency in a nutshell is putting the needs of others above your own. Now, again, that's not a bad thing. That's empathy, too. Yeah. But I have to take care of myself first. Yes. Bar none. That's not selfish. Right. That can lead into a selfishness, too. But I have to take care of myself before I can help other people.
Put your mask on before you help somebody else with theirs.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Like on the plane. Don't be codependent on the plane. So if I'm doing this well and others in my life are feeling distressed, might be healthy for me to kind of, if I go to lunch with you and I've had a shitty day, but you've had an even shittier day, I'm going to put my stuff aside and take care of my friend. Yeah. Because I know that once you feel better and you're okay, the next time I have something, which undoubtedly will be very soon. So that's healthy and that is equal balance. But there are moments in life where we have to just support each other and we will drop stuff. And that's normal and that's mutual and that's give and take, but not all the time. Yeah. So if you're someone who is constantly being a caregiver, And even as a therapist, I've learned, like, I get paid for that time. It's very succinct. There's boundaries around it. If you're not getting paid to do that, you're probably getting taken advantage of, or you're enabling.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive deep into that.
Okay. So, Carolyn, now that you've given us a brief kind of description or definition of what codependency is, tell us about when you discuss. I feel like this is cool because I feel like I could be the therapist now.
You are. It's like you're interviewing me. I love it.
The tables have turned.
And you know all this stuff, so you'll be able to call me on my bullshit if I glaze over something a little nicer than it maybe was.
You won't. Tell us about when you discovered that you had codependent tendencies.
Well, I laugh because it's a journey, right? I only recently began what I call my recovery in the past few years. And I've been in therapy since the age of 12. I think I might have even been a little younger. And, again, I went through grad school. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. I've been doing clinical work in my own private practice for about 6-7 years. Only now am I really understanding who I am and my recovery. And it's been really, really heavy. And there's been times where I felt so screwed up and so sick and such a fraud. And I actually think a lot of therapists feel this way. So I'm talking to you guys. You're not. I like I said, I had to have a good deep cry while I was even writing this because I can see the damage it's done to me, to my family, to some of my relationships, some of which I can't never. I'm not going to feel because those people are gone.
Yeah.
So, the first person to ever see it and name it was my dear friend, Paul.
Yeah.
Who's just the most wonderful human, I think, in this entire world, maybe next to your husband. He's a good man.
He's a feminist.
He is a feminist. Yeah. And so he was the first male friend, actually, that I truly had who ever only wanted friendship for me.
It's amazing.
Which was sadly... That's sad to me when I have to say that out loud. It has been the most healthiest, safest relationship in my life. And when I was about 17, I started an on and off again relationship with his best friend that went well into our sophomore year, who was also a good guy, but was going through some shit too.
This is very true. Both of our boyfriends, and that's how we met.
That is how we met.
Emotional wrecks of human beings who are also incredible people simultaneously.
Yeah. And I would say we have good relationships now, but so we survived. But Paul called out the dynamic of my behavior in that first breakup. And I'll never forget, we were sitting outside my house. He was dropping me off because, of course, I didn't have a car. And he hands me this book called A Woman's Worth. Yeah. And I laughed this off, which I regret so much. And I took so much ego offense to this book and even that gesture. I completely pushed it aside. I felt embarrassed and total denial. It actually felt shameful, not only to see someone seeing me in that light, but also to see myself in that light. And I would probably say I spent the next 20 years in a state of sort of denial. And then I'd come back and then I'd do it again. And
thanks, Paul. No. You really opened a door. He did a good job.
I denied it. I should have fucking read that book.
You just weren't ready. You have to be ready to do the work.
That is true. And so I accept that I have not been in healthy relationships with food, money, friendships, family, work. I know I'm a codependent because I avoid reality, even though I have been in control of my reality for longer than I've spent as a child. So I can't blame my parents anymore, right? And so, I'm addicted to attention. I'm addicted to being loved and needed.
A lot of us are.
And to, again, that consistency of that dance and that pattern in my life of getting into unhealthy dynamics, some toxic, and then kind of restarting and resetting boundaries and then doing it again and then restarting. So the second I feel tension at or against me, I shut down. I get angry. I get victimized. I get suffocated. I get anxious. I want to get away. I am very lucky. And it is pure luck that I've found my way out of some of the situations I have put myself in, Jen. Due to being rescued, you are one of those people who has rescued me time and time again. I have made myself mentally sick and physically sick. And again, it's just luck. I've burned many bridges. I have lost many friendships and even some really probably could have been good relationships because I couldn't stand to be in reality. And once I saw how pervasive this was, though, through my work actually with equine and horses and through people saying, we're actually not going to hate you. That's a moment you had. And we all have them. And you made a mistake. And me going, oh, I'm not bad. No. I didn't mess up. No. Things that scared me to do, owning my own shit, kind of noticing when I fall back into those patterns, and that's every day.
Yeah, no, that's great.
It truly is a recovery process.
It really is.
Every day.
A new modality of therapy, and people who are, on this journey with you and might feel similarly and are disinclined to judge you. I think you just found your people. And putting as much blame as I hear you putting on yourself for things that were difficult to help. But at the same time, I understand, we can acknowledge that somebody is acting in a way that is hard for them to help because of the way they were raised, whatever the case may be. But we may choose not to engage with that person because of the way that it impacts us.
Yes.
But it's sad to me that there's so much blame, you're blaming yourself for this.
I still do a lot.
And you shouldn't necessarily. And a lot of it too is you have so many good qualities that it's just unfortunate that people are like, oh, well, she, this attribute came through and I can't take that. They just weren't the right people for you and to understand you and to support you on this fucking journey, bro.
My journey.
Yes. So we're on to my first question, which is, how does one become codependent in the first place? And this is from Carolyn. I'm going to ask you, I found this from Very Well Health, which says codependence is thought to develop when a child grows up in a dysfunctional family environment where fear, anger, and shame go unacknowledged.
Absolutely.
The dynamic leads family members to withhold from expressing, repressing their emotions, and ignore their own needs. So tell us more about this.
Well, let's go back to the basics of secure attachment to our parental units. Whether that's adoptive, guardians, whatever, grandmas, grandpas, who cares? We all need nurturing. That's a fact of human life. We need to belong. And I love this because it's a fact that we need till we die.
Yeah.
Actually, on your deathbed, you need that. And you have a level of awareness to know the difference between good and bad, healthy, unhealthy, lesser, better, too dependent or anti-dependent, out of control, in control. This awareness in you is shaped through your environment, through your hopefully good parenting or good enough parenting, I like to say. And you access this through maturity. And you can't mature when you are stuck in an adapted state of self. So codependency is a state of self that there's no there. Yeah. You kind of are built on stilts. You think you are who you are, but it's either a facade or it's something that you are then breaking your back to keep up, which is more me. Yeah. When we're born, science is even showing this is happening in utero. Parenting through nurturing begins. Functional parenting exists in an environment that affirms, and I will stand on this till the day I die, affirms and celebrates the joyfulness of a child, nurtures dependency of a child. Like, God, are you fucking kidding me? I mean, I know you complain when your kid bugs you. That's normal, but they're also a kid. Yeah. Right? And
I'm going to miss it when he's a teenager and he's just like, give me some money, you bitch.
Totally, he won't do that.
No. Hopefully we're doing a good enough job to where you won't be a dickhead.
So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is coming from a person I have found extremely helpful in my codependency work, Pia Mellody. She calls this respectful structuring. Parents have a fucking hardest job in the world, really unpaid, unprepared, and you're doing it with someone else who also may be unprepared and you don't know how they're going to react either. So it's a hard fucking job. Yeah. You as a parent, you have to be able to very magically confront the child's reality as what it is. And you can't deny it because to them that is real. There are monsters in the closet. Yeah. But you also have to help them with what's appropriate. Yeah. And so how a child thinks, feels, behaves, exists in their body, that is just fact. Yeah. I don't care. Don't argue with the child about that. Yeah. But you can help do that respectful structuring without shame and guilt, which is something that I did not get. I don't think you got that. No. And you have to assist and help them create integrity and dignity and can help them consider what's going to be the most helpful to them as an adult. Yeah. And children are immature. 20-somethings are immature. It's really hard as a therapist when I'm listening to other young therapists get mad at 20-something clients. I did it too. Yeah. But they're children.
And they're often doing the exact same things we did. And I think we're really frustrated because we see ourselves in these folks.
That's countertransference.
Yes, yes it is. Yes, it is. And it's sad. But no, you're absolutely right. And we also want to acknowledge too that a lot of parents go on this journey either voluntarily or involuntarily on their own. Like my mom, who was a single parent who had, maladaptive tendencies from being really badly physically and psychologically abused. And never developed past, I think, like teenage age.
No. And while a very resilient person in her own way.
Yeah.
When it came to that, no,
definitely not. So, there's some other factors that definitely contribute or could contribute to codependent tendencies developing, which is, a family member who has substance use disorder, like drugs, alcohol, work, food, sex, gambling, you name it. A family member living with a chronic mental or physical illness, even though it's not the parent's fault, that wears on a child.
Absolutely.
And I'm not going to get into it, but with my other mom and my stepdad, like her identity is solely associated with being a caregiver.
Yes.
And that's all she does. And it is incredibly draining. It's not, my stepdad's fault that he's incredibly sick and relies on her for everything. But there's some dynamics that are definitely transpiring that I don't think are healthy for either of them.
She's not putting herself first.
She's absolutely not taking care of herself.
And you can't. That's the irony. You end up failing.
Yes.
And then actually feeling, you recapitulate that entire cycle.
Yes.
Because you feel like a failure. So you do everything to try and be loved and needed and feel in control.
Yes.
And you can't because it's not physically possible.
No, it's not.
There is, you cannot do it all. I'm sorry. Something will break.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in life that's beyond our control.
Yes.
And even if it's coming from a good place where, I want to take care of this person, I want to make sure their needs are met, etc. If you're not first taking care of yourself, as you said, you're no good to anybody.
Well, and think of how, not just intergenerationally, but how culturally, the norms in many cultures are collectivist.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're taking care of the community. You have to.
And the community's taking care of you, which is something that's really absent in American culture. American culture is all sorts of things, but like Anglo kind of influenced Western culture.
Americans have bred codependency.
Yeah, that makes sense. Gluten codependency.
Yeah.
So, Carolyn mentioned a lot of these things contributing to the development of codependent tendencies. Dysfunctional families tend to have some of these characteristics. They're chaotic and unpredictable. That was definitely what I grew up with. Unsupportive, scary and unsafe, emotionally and or physically neglectful. I went through that. Manipulative, blaming, overly harsh or abusive, shaming. This is my childhood in a nutshell.
I was gonna say,
I don't know how I didn't develop codependent tendencies based on everything I went through.
You've externalized.
I did externalize. A lot of people, and through no fault of their own, will emulate the behaviors that they saw modeled in their parents. I was the opposite to an extent.
Yes.
But I also was willing to do the work and be honest when I was in therapy. And that's something my mom could never do. And so she never did the work that was necessary to heal.
Yeah.
And so that's a big component of it. But, when children are blamed for the problems or are told there isn't a problem, which is super confusing, children intuitively know that something is wrong, but this feeling is never validated by an adult. That, that's really tough.
Yeah.
And the easiest way for kids to understand their chaotic families is to listen to the negative and distorted messages from adults and assume I'm the problem, which breaks my heart.
Well, a child's always going to do that.
Yeah.
That's their survival skill.
Because they're all ego.
Yes.
Because that's all they can be at that point. They haven't developed beyond that.
You are ripping their sense of identity and their self.
Yeah, it's really sad. A person who's codependent may have a hard time recovering themselves because they have the need to help the person with substance use disorder in the case where there's substance use disorder.
Huge.
They also cannot set healthy boundaries or give support to the person who has the substance use disorder. So, what you have something to contribute here. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say that, I'm going to honor that statement.
Honor it, bro.
Honor it. We learned
and
that
let's unpack it.
Yeah, let's unpack it. So, again, I'm going to go back to Pia Mellody. She defines the term codependency not as a dysfunctional family system, but as child abuse.
Yeah.
Which she's one of, I love that she does that.
Yeah.
And she defines abuse as anything that is less than nurturing. And I fucking love this because we live in it, and we just talked about this, we live in a society and a culture that is not only willing to look at sexual and physical abuse, but we won't look at emotional, intellectual, or spiritual abuse.
Interesting.
And those are, again, they're detrimental. You can see, I'm a living, walking thing. No one ever hit me.
Yeah.
But they might as well have.
Yeah.
You don't
have to hit to hurt.
Yeah.
I'm not making light of it, but that's what I always
That's
think.
what we
It's
do.
true.
It's true. Well, and it's important we have to discuss this, I think, because we have to understand that codependency is about abuse and trauma.
Yeah.
And it impacts, the impact on your body is lifelong.
Yeah.
And it's not that you can't get through that.
Right.
But if you don't, you're going to see a cascade effect.
Yeah.
And it's too hard for people to talk about, and it's dripping with shame, even in a therapeutic relationship. It's so difficult as a therapist to tell someone, hey, I think you were in an abusive home when they don't see it that way. And I get that. I never thought I was
That's
in
a
an
hard
abusive
awakening,
home.
a hard thing to have to reconcile.
And so I think it's part of unpacking codependency is unpacking a stigma that our culture actually doesn't help us protect.
Yeah,
either.
that makes sense.
And so anyway, it's obviously it's horrific in any instance when a child is physically or sexually abused. But whenever everyone is disrespectful for your body, but in codependent family or in a child who's going to develop codependency later on, their intellect is attacked. The nature of how they think. Never tell a child they're stupid. I was told that. My family was told that. Any emotional attack on a child just for being who they are, asking them to hold or change their emotions inside or release them differently so that it makes the parent feel comfortable. Spirituality, and this one's, I don't mean religion.
Right.
And this is a really weird one to bring up in therapy too. People get very uncomfortable when I talk about their spirituality. And they're like, you're like a Christian therapist.
Well, they don't know how to separate spirituality from religious.
Church. Yes.
Yeah.
And so when this is absolutely pervasive in my family, spirituality, my parent puts themselves in a position of being a child's higher power and existing as a cruel master in their universe.
Well, that's you had a narcissistic dad.
I did.
And my mom was just like that too.
You are nothing. I am everything. And I'm not going to let you forget that. I heard that all the time.
God damn it. Why are you going to make me cry today?
This is going to be a sad one.
My mom used to literally choke me and say, I gave you life and I can take it from you.
Holy shit. Yeah.
I just let you in, people, into some fucked up trauma.
That's awful.
Yeah, it's really,
you're going to learn then so again, that's a parenting style that's attacking, critical, ignoring, and abandoning.
Yeah.
Also having a parent who sets you up to fail. Then if you were to say anything to her, you either have to learn to adapt and get on her plane.
Yep.
Or fight back better.
Well, it's constant appeasement.
Yes.
Constant appeasement because you don't want, and the unpredictability, especially with somebody who has a personality disorder. I don't know how this person's going to come home.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of treatment I'm going to have to endure when they get here. Is she going to completely ignore me and stay on the phone with her friend all night? Is she going to come home and beat the shit out of me? Is she going to pick apart the way that I did my chores? Like, you just no child should live in that sense of fear and unpredictability. Well,
because you're in a part of your nervous system that's not meant to be on all the time, which is why you become hypervigilant.
That's why I'm anxious fuck, man.
Yes, and that is where anxiety comes. So I think we can both agree it's unhealthy to be anything other than authentically who you are.
Right.
And to be told in a society or in your family. So we cannot talk about codependency without talking about your family system. I'm so sorry. And people are very protective of their families. And when you grow up in an abusive system where you're forced to behave in a way that makes your parent comfortable because maybe they're codependent, they're abusivires, or they're just fucking delusional, that pattern will persist.
For sure.
And the stress of, like I said, it's incredible. Being a parent is hard. I'm not saying that you can't get mad at your child.
We're only human.
You're also human.
Yeah.
And go back and apologize.
Yes.
My father never apologized. My mom apologized at any time, but never. Do you ever remember your mom saying sorry about anything?
Not really.
No, me neither.
It wasn't her thing.
No.
Because she was never wrong. Well, it was always me. It was my fault. As an 8-year-old.
Yes.
It's totally your fault because you know what you're doing at 8.
And a child, if any of this is resonating and you were a child that was asked either overtly or covertly to be responsible for making your parents or your again, in my family, it was more my dad. My mom was more of the enabler.
Yeah.
But if you are being asked to make your parent feel comfortable or to have to endure feelings of being uncomfortable to make everything okay.
Yep.
I mean, that was my family to a nutshell.
Yeah.
And so if that's resonating, go to therapy and talk about your family.
Totally.
Unwrap it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, all of this may be leading you to ask, am I in a codependent relationship, whether it be with a friend or an intimate partner? If so, we can probably help, or rather the Cleveland Clinic can. I think we're pretty helpful too. According to their list, yeah, we've been through some shit. Here are some signs that you're in a codependent relationship. Let's start with the Cleveland Clinic's definition of a codependent relationship. In a codependent relationship, there tends to be a severe imbalance of power. You covered a lot of this. Often one person may be giving too much time, energy, etc., and focused on the other person. We talked about that. Mm-hmm. You feel like you need to save them from themselves. In a codependent relationship, a partner often takes on the role of caretaker. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're quick to anger. What you were talking about, we got to keep dad happy. We got to make sure that we don't awaken the beast. Mm-hmm. So you're walking on eggshells all the time. Taking time out for self-care makes you feel selfish. Mm-hmm. It's hard to tear yourself away even for a little bit of peace. If you feel that way, you might be in a codependent relationship. It's difficult to explain how you're feeling about your relationship. Mm-hmm. When asked about how things are going with your relationship, it's hard to define what's positive or negative.
It's complicated.
Yeah, everything's complicated. But
but for the most part, don't you agree that in your relationship with Bill, because I can say this for Mario, it was never complicated?
No, it wasn't. And it's always been very clear communication.
It's been very clear.
Yeah. It's been nice.
If you're saying it's complicated, you might. I feel like Jeff Foxworthy.
Yeah.
If you're saying you're in a complicated,
it's true. I don't remember the rest of that.
Codependent.
Yeah. But and I don't feel like we're in this situation. But when I've been in less stable relationships, you feel anxious when you don't hear from them. Mm-hmm. Do you stress out over whether or not you've checked the phone, etc.? Like what's going on there? Are you panicking or thinking up worst case scenarios if there's large gaps of time that you're not together? I mean, I think we all have a tendency to go to a dark place when I don't hear from my husband, probably because I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts.
You don't hear from me if I don't even text you back. You're like, bitch, you dead?
That's more like true crime. Like, she could be in the trunk of somebody's car.
True.
Somebody could have abducted my husband on the side of the road when he was trying to be a good Samaritan. Who knows?
Right.
It's more that than any sort of anxiety about the relationship.
Which I deeply appreciate.
Good.
Deeply appreciate.
I care. I feel less inclined to check on you first thing in the morning now that you have somebody who lives with you. I don't have to worry about you like dying in the house and having your cat eat your face if you had a cat.
He won't let me bring a cat in the house, don't worry.
Snakes with fur. You have trouble being alone. Mm-hmm. How often do you spend time alone versus spending time with your partner? Can you sit by yourself and rest comfortably without feeling you need to reach out to them? You routinely cancel plans to spend time with your partner. I did that all the time in my 20s. So insecure. You feel like maybe you're asking for too much. Your basic needs need to be met, and you feel like you're asking for too much. Yeah. It's problematic. Their behavior escalates when you try to set healthy boundaries. Uh-huh. So these are some of the indications that you might be in a codependent relationship. So Carolyn, in your personal and professional opinion, is this list accurate? Is there anything you want to add?
Oh, 100%. And actually you did a really great job. I'm going to post this. I'll probably do a video for it.
Yeah.
You talked about what Pia Mellody calls the secondary symptoms of relational problems of codependency. Yeah. So, again, what we call the the true child self, think of that like a little gem.
Yeah.
You're born, when you saw your baby boy in your arms, he was perfect.
Yeah.
He wasn't fucked up by the world yet, and you just saw him.
Yeah.
And we tend to kind of, if you're the type of person that goes out in the world and looks at things and sees things like that, over time, we all become, it's inevitable. You're going to become an adaptive child. No one gets to adulthood alive, right? Or free of pain.
Yeah.
So think of it this way. You start off this beautiful gem child. You're wonderful. You're everything. And then people's expectations are on you. Mm-hmm. Society, norms, standards, gender roles even. Yeah. And you kind of lose that goofy kid part, and you have to sit still and be in school. And so again, it's always, we have to learn both, right? It's a mix. But so the more in a codependent situation or in a family where there's trauma and abuse, you're going to lose that sense of self and you become what we call the adaptive child. And that part can stay in your body. I'm sure you've met that person. You're like, they look like an adult, but they're acting like a 15-year-old girl.
My mom.
Yes, absolutely. So, chronologically they're stuck, and that pattern can exist. And you really, when you're in adult life, you have to have a certain amount of control and autonomy. But if you were never taught that, or when you try to, you were abused, the world is going to actually be scary. Yeah. And the world is a scary fucking place. You have to be tough. And so codependents often will have difficulties in these relational dynamics that all exist outside of themselves. So you talked about a lot of the things they're going to feel when they're in a dynamic relationship. So before in another episode, I talked about, hey, if I throw you a rope and you're holding one and I'm holding another, that's a relationship. Yeah. There's been moments in our friendships where it's tense and I'm pulling or you're pulling. Yeah. There's been moments where I've dropped my end and you've said, hey, dude, you dropped your head. That's not cool.
It's human.
I don't like that.
Conflict is human. It's how you deal with it.
Yes, that defines you. Yeah. And there's been times where I've gone, oh shit, you're right. I did drop my head. Hey, I'm really sorry. I'm going to pick it up now. Yeah. That's healthy. Yeah. Right? You didn't come over and hold my end. No. You didn't say, hey, wow, you didn't make what I needed to work and you said this. Well, that's okay. I'll just not say anything. I'll just do it for you. And then hold that anger and resentment. So again, if that's resonating, so, when someone comes to therapy, they talk about these common themes. So I want you to listen up. Something called negative control. Are you telling others or are you allowing someone else to tell you who you are and who you should be? Yeah. That is setting up a reality that is outside of the realm what actually is. So if you're having that done to you, or I hear this a lot, the person comes in, but they spend the whole session talking about their shithead boyfriend or husband. Yeah. And I'm like, well, they're not here. Yeah.
Who are you in all of this?
Who are you in all this? Yeah. Well, no, but here. So again, if you're having thoughts that you need to fix or change others or others need to get fixed or changed to accommodate you, that's called negative control.
Interesting.
And that's a part of what the adaptive child tries to do in order to be liked. I just, if you have a parent that has been abusive to you and you go, well, then I have to just do things in an effort to survive in this world and be liked. I better just become what everyone needs me to be.
Well, that's why I'm funny. Like, I swear to God, it was like, I have this parent who abuses me, and I don't think necessarily being liked by everybody was the primary goal, but I got positive reinforcement from making people laugh. Yeah. And so I was always in trouble because it didn't matter if it was positive or negative reactions. Okay. It was a fucking reaction. Yeah. And so folks, I think, who are raised by codependent and abusive parents or just abusive parents, they tend to seek out that validation. Yes. And a lot of times it's not in the, the most healthy ways, I guess. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, they say a child who's acting out is a child who needs attention.
That's right.
And I went the opposite way. I went, well, let me be perfect and quiet and do everything wonderfully and never cause any problems, never do anything. So I don't do that. If you're holding a lot of resentments, endless anger that goes beyond a situation, anger's healthy. We have to get angry. Yeah. But if you're stuck in that injustice and that unfairness of a past event or person's behavior to the point that you're obsessively thinking about how to change them, that's something you're going to see, and that's an adaptive child residual. Again, I mentioned spirituality issues. You gain relief from being a human when you exist in a realm that's greater than yourself. That comes directly from Pia Mellody. She calls it guidance, solace, serenity. I see a ton of spiritual bypassing, especially with millennials. They go, I went to this, and which I think is also kind of a young thing too. It's like, I went to this great concert, or I went to Burning Man, or I went to this or that, and I just had this like amazing spiritual, I think I found myself. Cool. Yeah. Okay, but now what are you going to do? Do you actually, and the problem is they find that and they go, this feels really good, but then who am I? Yeah. And then I go right back to that environment where it's toxic, and then I think I'm the problem, and so you're constantly then spirituality seeking. Interesting. So again, that goes into avoiding reality. This is where, when you talked about addiction, this is where addiction, somaticized illness, which is really just, so like my childhood anxiety, where I would get separation anxiety. My mom would drop me up at school. There's a couple of reasons why I think that happened, but I think that was also me somaticizing a lot of the anxiety I was feeling at home.
Oh, that makes sense.
And wanting to be in proximity to my family, which was scary. So again, avoiding reality. we live in a tension with intense somaticized illness and immune toxicity. We tell people to be in touch with their body, but we only tell them how to do it through social media, going out partying. Yeah. Again, it'd be lovely. And I think there's a camp that's like, no, go volunteer, go do good shit, go get educated, go help people.
Just fucking dance, bro.
Dance, yeah.
Do something physically and emotionally healthy for yourself.
Absolutely. And help people. Yeah. So, it's also really lucrative and insidious to the pockets of third-party insurance companies and pharmaceuticals. For sure. That's another podcast.
Yeah, take a pill. It'll fix everything.
Intimacy issues. Again, that's another reason why, if you are struggling with codependent behaviors, you're going to sharing and receiving our bodies and our thoughts and our emotions without judgment from another. That's intimacy. Okay. It's mutual. It's consistent. It grows, and over time it's consensual, and it creates a connection to yourself and to that other person. Okay. And true admiration is the ultimate form of mature intimacy. So and that's often why a lot of codependents will say, oh, it's the most, I feel so connected to this person. You probably do. That's the only time you actually feel yourself, and they're actually paying literal attention to you.
Interesting.
In sex. Which is why I was even more fucked up when my fucked up boyfriend was like, I don't want to look at you during sex.
Oh, God.
Like, I don't even get that.
Yeah. That's the fucking bare minimum, man. Yeah.
God.
So bad.
Anyway.
Glad you're not with that asshole anymore. So, we're going to try to wrap this up quickly. I only wanted to touch on this briefly because I find it really fascinating. We know that both men and women can exhibit codependent tendencies. And it definitely seems like our patriarchal society sets women up in particular to be codependent. So I found a good article that, was
this
good for
was great.
Yeah, my confirmation bias when I found this article, How Patriarchy Breeds Codependency. I'm just going to touch on this one thing that the author said. She asserts for centuries, patriarchy has delivered a narrow script to follow. Personally, I fell off script years ago, married and divorced by the age of 25. I crusaded through my 20s and 30s, going in and out of healthy, toxic, and emotionally abusive relationships. I felt shame and guilt for not settling down, for exploring different relationships, for not following the script. I saw myself in search of the one, waiting for him to come, waiting for him to choose me, and then my life would magically fall into place. My worth and my need to be needed were fast and firm. How many fucking movies do we see?
This is all Hollywood.
Yeah, it really is. Hollywood just reinforces this knight in shining armor type shit. And then she goes on to talk about, too, like, we couldn't even have economic independency. It was all tied to a man. I mean,
or sexual independence until the pill.
Right. I mean, what was it, the 70s before a woman on her own without her husband could open a fucking line of credit, get a credit card? That is insane.
Women
My husband was born in the 70s.
Yeah.
Insane. So I just, I kind of wanted to touch on that. Conditioning from patriarchy, I think, blinds us from seeing our own codependent patterns, and our trauma inhibits us from breaking it down further. So close us out on this idea, because I think it's really interesting.
Well, I get it. It's like, it's not that, and I think men don't benefit from this either. Yeah. We're pretty much, socialized from birth. We live in a heteronormative gender stereotype world. Yeah. I would say, Jen, we could just re-quote America Ferrera in the Barbie movie.
Oh, yeah.
That whole monologue.
That's why men hate it. Not all men.
Yeah.
Insecure men.
But, I found an article, it's listed in our show notes, but gentleman, Dr. Jenner, has a great blog and website, and he wrote, the ideal woman for many men comes straight out of a codependent checklist. Many women are taught from an early age that they're to be a certain way around men, and generations of women have been treated. And how many men are lost when it comes to what their role is supposed to be in this whole intersection?
They're victims of that as well.
I think empowered women, yes, they are. Empowered women nurture kinder boys. Yes. Kindness and love. I
don't need the bad boy. No. I don't want somebody to treat me like shit. I've always wanted the nice person.
The bad boy isn't happy either. No. That no one is feeling good. No one is getting off in this. Unless you're a narcissist, then that's different. Yeah. But we all want to benefit in a collective sense. And I just feel that the kinder we can be to each other, the kinder we can be to ourselves. I'm telling myself this too, the kinder we can be to children. Yes. We really got to shift this or we're fucked. Yeah. But again, I just hope that, we can understand the damage. Because if I were to call CPS and say, hey, I'm working with a family and the parents are being extremely emotional abusive, they wouldn't do anything.
Right.
And I understand they can't.
Yeah.
But even when I talk to parents about, hey, that's abuse. Oh, I'm not abusive. And so I'm still learning as a clinician how to have this conversation where I'm not shaming you either.
Yeah.
But I'm also, you also are in a contract where you are coming to me and saying, this is when it is okay to listen to people, when you are paying for their help.
Right.
When I think when it's a sponsor or a friend who has your best interests at heart, and we talked about this before, listen to your friends.
Yeah.
I don't know that you should listen to your family. It depends. I say that depends what kind of family you have.
Yeah.
And again, I'll say that depends on what kind of friends you have. But if people are breeding gossip and insecurity and shame, they're unhealthy, and that doesn't mean we have to cut them out necessarily, but you have to step aside and please be okay looking. Don't be afraid. It's going to be scary at first, and that's going to be really freeing and really liberating. Because to actually be who you are is the biggest gift you can give anyone. Yeah. To allow them integrity.
And it takes time to figure out who you are. It is a long journey, and I don't expect
change who you are.
And you can. And I don't expect anybody in their 20s to know who they are. I certainly didn't.
No, I didn't either.
I think my sense of self was intact, but I had a lot of growth. I had a lot of growing and reflecting and healing to do. Yeah. And, be kind to yourself. Be kind to your young self.
Yes, please.
Don't look back super critically. Yeah. Use it as a springboard for growth and development and change and healing.
And don't try and change people.
No.
And if someone really doesn't want to change, move on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Let them be who they are. Yeah. You can still love and be kind and not hurt by them.
For sure. We will leave you with those wise words. We hope you enjoyed this episode. It's a heavy one, but we hope you got some insight and feel comfortable kind of going through the healing process. If you're in this space, if you've been affected by a relationship with a codependent or somebody who behaves in a codependent way. And we gotta make it so people can reach out to us with questions.
I would love that.
Yeah, we're going to work on that.
There's so many resources, too.
There are.
Google.
Google. And we'll put a lot of resources in our show notes.
And you don't need to pay $1 million. Just go to a free Al-Anon meeting.
Yes.
Codependent Anonymous meeting.
Good advice.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. You have a great night. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.